to order. We will move from this directly into audit, and then following that, an executive session, of course, of the audit committee. But thanks for taking the time on this, what is today? Thursday morning? It is indeed. So I do want to introduce you to John Lee, our new faculty regent, once he joins. I think others have reached out to him to express their welcome. But Mariah, unless this is an inconvenient time for you, let's go ahead and call the roll and ask, of course, the two pertinent questions.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
In accordance with TCA 844-108C3, there are two questions that need to be answered by regents for the record. First, can the regent simultaneously hear and speak with others participating in the meeting? And second, is the regent alone in the room? If the answer to both questions is yes, the regent can simply answer yes to both questions. Anyone who is not alone should identify any other people present in the room with the regent. When I call your name, please answer these two questions. Governor Lee, Regent Apple.
Here and yes to both questions.
Regent Burdine.
Here and yes to both questions.
Regent George. Regent Gill.
Here and yes to both questions. But is it really Thursday morning? Did I sleep all the way through Wednesday and not wake up?
No, the chancellor has corrected me by text. I'm going to blame it on the Labor Day.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I just needed to check.
It is.
Don't feel bad. I thought it was yesterday and got all ready.
Even better. Oh, go ahead, Mariah.
No problem. Regent Gill, do you mind to answer the two questions?
Yes and yes.
Thank you, sir. Regent Green.
Good morning. Here and yes and yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Hatcher, Regent House, Regent Lee, Regent Long, Regent Powers.
Here and yes to both.
Vice Chair Reynolds.
Here and yes to both.
Commissioner Schwinn, Regent Shelton.
Here and yes to both.
Regent Varlin.
Here and yes to both.
Regent Womp and Regent White.
Here, yes to both, and I will need to hop off at 10:30 Eastern.
Okay.
Thanks for letting us know. Madam Chair, your board is assembled.
Very good. Thank you very much. One other housekeeping item, of course, since we are meeting electronically, of course, this is the most economically efficient way for us to gather, and especially for us to at least have this discussion and timely review of matters that we'll take up at our regularly scheduled board meeting on September 22 and 23. Given that this necessity to meet electronically is non-controversial and routine in nature for us, I would propose that this be adopted by unanimous consent. Of course, as always, if anyone feels that we need a vote on the necessity to meet electronically, the floor is open for that. But if there is no objection, I'm going to safely assume that the necessity to meet electronically is adopted. Any objection? Hearing none and seeing a few head nods, thank you, Regent Burdine. The necessity to meet electronically is adopted by unanimous consent. With that, Chancellor, do you have any opening remarks for us this morning?
Yes, good morning. I'm going to say you just can't give busy people a day off. It messes us all up. We don't know what day it is where you are, but thanks to all of you for being here today and helping us conduct this important meeting. I do have two items that I would like to update the board on. First of all, I'll start with our presidential searches. As you know, Dr. Purrier announced her retirement as of September 30th and President Stuart Smith as of December 31st. You approved the search criteria on August 8th for TCAT Athens and TCAT Murfreesboro, and the positions have been posted. The search committee for TCAT Athens is being chaired by Regent Danny Varlin. Thank you, Danny Varlin. Other regents serving on the TCAT Athens search are Regent Tom White and Ramona Shelton. And for TCAT Murfreesboro, it's being chaired by Vice Chair Emily Reynolds. And other regents serving on this search are Regent Mary Lou Apple, Yolanda Green, and Ramona Shelton. I am very grateful to each and every one of you for agreeing to do that, and we are jumping into that work. As you know, applications have been coming in, and I'm sure those of you on the committee have already started to read. Both searches are being held simultaneously. Both committees will have an orientation meeting in mid-September, and we'll keep you updated on these searches, the progression of these searches. The announcement regarding both candidates is expected to be made by December 1st. And then a quick update on Blue Oval City. Work is continuing to move along. Curriculum and development with Ford is ongoing. Ford has approved the Electrical Vehicle Production Technician Program, or EVPT. We are looking to deploy that as a dual enrollment only program in the fall of 2023 at select regional school sites. And once the TCAT BOC campus is completed, the EVPT program will be offered there as well. West Tennessee regional TCATs continue to ramp up dual enrollment activities in support of BOC and other area industries. Fall term for the TCATs began on September 6th, so final enrollment numbers for the fall term are coming in. And an example is that TCAT Jackson is anticipating 1,800 dual enrollment students this fall term. So dual enrollment is bigger than it has ever been for us in this area. Heath McMillan has completed the BOC apprenticeship development work, and Ford is reviewing that as we speak. This covers the skilled labor trade areas of electrical maintenance, mechanical maintenance, and die maintenance. We are continuing to have weekly meetings with Ford and SK regarding the design of the campus. The campus design concept was approved by State Building Commission in July, and we have spent some time focused on the training space for SK, specifically regarding the amount of security for their intellectual property and proprietary technology that they'll have in the building. We are still on track for a May 2024 completion date of that building. Last week, Heath McMillan, Jeff Sisk, and Christy Bennett from the state DOL met with the Kentucky system colleagues to begin discussing the common training development and training delivery goals for the SK portion of this project. BOSK is building twin EV battery plants in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, at the same time as they are building the Ford BOC assembly plant and SK battery plant in Memphis Regional Megasite. We understand the need for onboarding, upskilling, and training for new employees at BOC, even prior to completion of the TCAT BOC campus and the Ford plant completion. In response, we have an early skills training strategy developed. This strategy has identified TBR and community sites down to the room number level where we can locate equipment and deliver training and onboarding upskilling for new hires at the Ford plant.
She is
Ford issued
smooth as anything. I'm trying to get on
Somebody has their mic open. Just a cautionary note. Thank you. Go ahead, Chancellor. Sorry.
That Ford issued a statement of work on 9/1/22. They are requesting a proposal RFP for curriculum development and training delivery for the EV battery manufacturing and quality control for the process. The training delivery is scheduled for first quarter 2023 and will be a part of our early skills training strategy. So again, a lot of great work going on there with Blue Oval City. And I would just like to quickly thank Southwest for a wonderful event that they held last week that I was able to attend, opening their new pilot training program, and thank Regent George and former Regent Duckett for attending. It was a great event, and we are going to be training pilots at the highest level in that facility. So much thanks to Southwest and to the team at TBR that you put in behind the scenes to make that project come to fruition. There was a lot of different work for us that we are not accustomed to dealing with the FFA that we had to put into this. But again, a very exciting opportunity for that part of the state, and the pilots that will be coming out of that training, I have great confidence, are going to be highly skilled. the head of the program and the person and the individuals that did the majority of the development of the curriculum are pilots that have been trained at the highest level, have been engaged in this work for a number of years, and so very exciting. I also want to just thank TCAT Whiteville and TCAT Memphis Bartlett for hosting me and giving me great tours of their facilities. It was a pleasure being with them in person and being able to hear and talk about some of the exciting work that's going on at those two TCATs particularly. Madam Chair, I will turn it back over to you.
That's a great report. Does anyone have questions or comments for the Chancellor? Thanks for keeping us in the loop on Blue Oval City. The announcement over in Athens of the lithium plant, have we been in the loop on that in any way, or the folks that are at either Cleveland State or the TCAT there?
We were not prior to the announcement, but we are now. And
right.
We'll be engaged in providing training for them as well. So yes, exciting times. A lot of great things are going to be going on with EV, yet still to be announced in the state. So
we will stand by. So that's great. We have had our new faculty regent, John Lee, join us in these last couple of minutes. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Sorry, I had a few technical difficulties this morning getting logged in.
We understand. We're just glad you're here. Everybody will recall that John comes on as our non-voting faculty member for this next year as part of his 2-year term. He is with the TCAT at Elizabethton, where he's an industrial training coordinator and diesel power equipment instructor. And you guys will also remember that in 2020, John was our SOAR Award winner for Staff Member of the Year. So what else would you like for us to know about you? We look forward to seeing you in person when we head to Pellissippi here in a couple of weeks.
I look forward to meeting everybody as well. You pretty much give the synopsis. I've been with the TCAT system for 13 years. It's been a wonderful 13 years. I'm very excited for the opportunity to work with everyone and to learn everything that our state has to offer and to hear about all the different and great things that we're doing at all of our schools. That's what I try to take away from any meeting that I have an opportunity to attend is what are other schools doing and what can we incorporate into our school to make our school better and take those opportunities back to Elizabethton. So it's a great opportunity for us and for me. I'm excited about serving.
We are excited about having you, and we know there are lots of great things going on in Northeast Tennessee too. So thanks for all you're doing. We may also have members of the media and others on today, so welcome to you as well. With that, our next order of business is for me to call on Vice Chancellor Blackwood and Vice Chancellor Fox, who joins us in her official capacity today, I think for the first time, to give us an update from personnel and compensation and a couple of items that committee will be considering when we meet.
Pardon me, Vice Chair Reynolds and Dr. Blackwood and Vice
Oh,
Chancellor Preston.
Questions. I'm so
yes,
sorry.
Ma'am.
Yes,
no problem. Regent Lee, if you don't mind, if you could please confirm that you can hear and speak with others participating in the meeting, and also if you are alone in the room.
Yes, ma'am. I am. I can hear and speak with others, and I am alone in the room.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mariah. Thank you for keeping me straight. Okay. Oh, here we go. Dr. Blackwood, are you up next?
I am. And greetings, Vice Chair Reynolds, Dr. Tidens, and members of the board. This item concerns community colleges promotion and tenure, as well as tenure upon appointment recommendations that you see summarized in your materials. Next slide, please. All of these items have been recommended by the presidents through their own institutional and board policy, reviewed by board staff, and all of these are endorsed for recommendation by the staff here. I just again want to highlight for the board the process for how these recommendations come up from the colleges to the board. Again, there's significant length of time and review that goes into a recommendation that's made ultimately by the president to the board for promotion and tenure. There are numerous checks and balances in this process that occurs over the course of about 9 to 15 months. And it is a recommendation that is made with considerable deliberation throughout the process, which begins at the departmental level with the faculty collecting artifacts to support their service, their scholarship, and their teaching that would apply to promotion and tenure. That's then reviewed by their peers and ultimately a campus-wide committee. After that, it is reviewed by the dean, the chief academic officer, and the president before it comes to you for consideration. Each step of the way, there's an appeals process. So this is a recommendation that comes to you today that's had about a year of runway time through a process of lots of deliberation and checks and balances along the way. So getting into the recommendations this cycle, we're bringing forward to you 4 faculty for promotion and 1 faculty for tenure at Chattanooga State. These were not included in the last board meeting where we did the comprehensive review, simply due to a clerical error. We're also bringing forward 3 recommendations for tenure for appointment. These 3 recommendations to grant tenure to eligible faculty members upon employment as faculty at Cleveland, Northeast, and Pellissippi State Community Colleges have been recommended again by their presidents through their own institutional board policy, reviewed by board staff, and endorsed for recommendation here. Policy 5.02.03.70 allows colleges to request tenure upon employment as faculty for candidates with extraordinary credentials, and that exception shall be requested when the faculty member is employed in that rank. I want to bring special attention to 2 of those candidates. They have served at Cleveland and Northeast State previously as administrators, and upon their request to serve the college in the role as faculty, those presidents have provided their support to employ them as faculty due to their distinguished service, and that both of those appointments will help meet long-term staffing needs in those respective departments. Each of the 3 candidates have extraordinary credentials and exhibited professional excellence and outstanding abilities sufficient to demonstrate that their future services and performances justify the permanence of academic tenure. Madam Chair, this is a summary of all of the recommendations related to tenure and promotion, as well as appointment by exception, which have been reviewed by the staff and recommended to the board today. At this point, I will turn it over to Vice Chancellor Fox to talk about the next 2 items.
Regent Green, oh, 1 second, Dr. Fox. Regent Green, as chair of personnel and comp, I know your committee will take this up, but you feel reasonably good about this based on what you currently know?
Absolutely. I think we have a chance to do this every year around this same time. So it's pretty standard, and really just applaud the recommendations for each college.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll hear this again for final action here in a couple of weeks. So thank you, Dr. Blackwood, for your hard work. And now we'll go to Dr. Fox.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chancellor, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I am going to touch on briefly just the second 2 items, the faculty promotion correction at Pellissippi State Community College. This was simply a clerical error on the part of the school. A faculty member's starting salary on the June faculty promotion request was incorrectly provided by the college, and this action is to correct that clerical error and approve the 5% increase on the correct salary. So as you'll recall, these are the salary increases that the board approved at the June meeting. So this was just a clerical error in one salary, and this is a correction of that. The faculty promotions increase at Chattanooga State Community College, as Dr. Blackwood mentioned earlier in her summary, Chattanooga State mistakenly omitted 4 faculty members from their June promotion list and the corresponding increases with those promotions. Approval of the increases is recommended at this time. So this is just the fiscal action related to Dr. Blackwood's earlier description of the 4 faculty members. And that is all I have.
Excellent. Well, how are you doing? How's the new job feel?
Great. I'm excited to be here. Kind of feel like I'm getting getting the ropes a little bit here and feeling like I'm contributing. So excited to be here. I'm at the beach this week, so I'm coming to you from the beach, so that's pretty fun. But yeah, I love it. It's very interesting and fun, and getting to meet a lot of new people and learn new things, and finally feel like I'm contributing a little bit to the team. So I'm excited to be here and serving with this great team.
Excellent. Well, enjoy the beach, but don't forget to come back. Thank you. We're glad you're here. Anything else for Dr. Fox? If not, Dick Tracy has an update for us from Tennessee State University. TSU has been in the news, at least here in Middle Tennessee, a good bit, with a large incoming freshman class and a problem of nowhere to house them all just yet. But I know they're working through that. And Dick, we appreciate your diligent work with them on so many fronts.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go quickly brief you on what we're doing for TSU currently. In July, we went to the Building Commission and took forward projects that were in this year's appropriations. And that included $60 million for the new engineering classroom building, $3 million for the Love Center renovation, $5 million for electrical upgrades. And they also received in the budget $250 million towards campus-wide initiatives. We came forward with a project to do work in Boswell and Davis, just under $30 million, and the approval to do a master plan amendment. We got that approved. Working with their master planner, Wolpert, they've given us a proposal back to do a master plan update. And what the goal of that is to help them come up with priorities for capital outlay as well as capital maintenance that would address the remaining 183 million out of the appropriations. In that, there was, I think, 36 million identified for infrastructure improvements, and that will help prioritize that work. We have the electrical upgrades ongoing. They were able to finalize an agreement with NES, and the plan is we're going to put the duct bank, the conduit, the infrastructure in. NES will set the equipment, pull all the conductors, all the wires across the primary lines across the campus, and then when they're finished, they will own and maintain that. So the campus won't be responsible for the upkeep of the primary power across the campus. We also received, we're notified that they received another 32 million of ARP funds for their Food and Animal Science Center. It's a project that we've worked with them on the past. It was substantially a lot less money that they had in there. And so we'll be kicking that off. On the housing, I've been working with the campus for quite a while to do a housing study, probably I finally got them to engage that a few months ago. And that is working with Moody Nolan, who was the architect that brought in consultants on the new housing we just completed. We brought 700 beds online in August. But the plan is to identify where to build the next housing, to look at what housing we could renovate. But I think the bigger issue is to come up with a financial plan on how they can fund those, because their rents have been too low to afford the cost of building new housing. They've addressed that with their board members and they're beginning to increase their rent. So I've come up with a plan, and my plan is they disclosed a project in next year's budget to build the next phase of housing. I've talked with the secretary, commissioner of F&A. I've talked with the lieutenant governor. What I'm proposing is to bring a project forward to the October Building Commission, which is well ahead of next year's budget. This would be funded with the local funds would be funded with housing auxiliary funds, about $3.5 million. And what that's going to allow us to do is to start designing the next phase of housing, hire the architect, hire a construction manager, general contractor. And this is, we've identified they want to build about 1,000 beds. The budget is $157 million. By bringing those on board, I'll be able to determine the actual, what we think the actual cost of that will be, schedule on that, if we'll have to break it into 2 or 3 different facilities. And then once we've determined that, then we can go to the school bond authority and we'll understand exactly how much they want, if they're able to fund that, or if they have to continue to adjust their rental rates. So they sent me all the information. We've sent that to THEC, and so that is in process right now. So hopefully that'll, again, help looking at the long-term housing needs. The issue is, best case scenario, you're looking at probably over 2.5 years to get those 1,000 beds online. So I think their issue, if they continue to have an issue with overflow housing, they'll have to come up, I think, with a plan for next year. And we're having those discussions with them also. So that's kind of a brief update what we have going on. Either we have other projects, obviously, that we're working with on some previous appropriations, but those are the things that we're just starting up based off of this year's funding.
Dick, for Regent Lee and our newer regents as well, give a brief note of explanation as to why we still have TSU in our portfolio, if you will, when it comes to facilities.
Yes, Vice Chair. The reason that we have is when the Focus Act came into place, basically the LGIs, the locally governed institutions, with the 6 universities, were able to submit a plan where they would do their own capital projects. And that had to go to THEC, the administration, I believe, to be approved. I don't know that TSU ever submitted one. We've had a lot of discussions. They really don't have the staff on board to do the work. So at this point, so since then, we basically are responsible for all their capital outlay, capital maintenance projects. Now, we're not responsible for leases. So I think the issue with the housing, one of the other things is, in the LGIs, we are still responsible for all projects that are funded with school bonds. So athletics, housing, student centers, those types of functions at the other 5 universities, all those projects are still contracted with the Tennessee Board of Regents, because all the funding for that has to come through TBR, based off of how the school bond authority is structured. So we still are involved in those. TSU are involved in all projects because they haven't been able to separate for capital.
Dick, thanks for providing this update. As y'all know, TSU is very dear to my heart. It's my college. I was just wondering, do we have any suggestions or provide any guidance on being able to remedy their current problem with over those 2,000 students? I think it's close to 2,000 students that don't have housing on campus.
Yeah, I don't think there are any other opportunities except look at off-site housing. I've had discussions with the campus and meetings about looking at doing public-private partnerships with private companies that may look at building housing adjacent to the campus. I told them we could look at the opportunity of building housing on campus that we could lease to them. But again, the issue is timing. Regardless, it's going to take some time. I've reached out to a company I've worked with before that they're putting together some information. They basically do temporary housing. They're almost like multi-trailer type units. I know there was a big demand for those during COVID. I talked to them. They did some at some of the universities that were housing people on campus. The issue, though, with doing any of that is finding a location we can do that and getting the infrastructure in place to place those in time. And again, that would be a limited number of beds also. So I think that they're going to have to continue to look at those opportunities. I've talked to them about looking at the potential of leasing apartments off campus as opposed to leasing hotel rooms. I know the University of Tennessee has done that because if you lease those for a year and they could find 4-bedroom type apartments, 3-bedroom apartments, those could be more cost effective than the hotels are putting in. So we're trying to help them the best we can to come up with some ideas, but it's going to be a challenge, I think, continue going forward for at least the next couple of years.
Dick, this is Regent Gill. Refresh my memory. The role that we continue to play as a result of the Focus Act and staying in control or managing the bond fund. Does TBR have any financial responsibility with that? So, for example, if there was if there were some bad assumptions made on how many rooms were needed, and they built 1,000, but they could only have 500 students, and the money didn't come in to be able to do the debt service and so on and so forth, is there any obligation there to TBR?
That's a real good question. The way it's structured is, and one of the other things that TBR, we have to, we approve their budgets, but when it comes to school bond authority, one of the requirements in that is that TBR has the ability to capture any of their state appropriations to cover any shortfall in school bond debt. So there is a provision that if they don't get the revenue for whatever the function, say they built the stadium and they weren't getting whatever revenue source that was going to pay the debt, and there's a shortfall, we can capture their state appropriations to make sure that we cover the school bond debt. So we look pretty thoroughly at when we're doing the evaluations for any school bond debt for any of the LGIs. One of the other, when it comes to school bond authority leases, school bond, in working with the rating agencies, they all look at anything that looks like debt, which would include leases. So all leases have to be approved. All leases, I believe, over maybe $75,000, $150,000 annually, or over 5 years, have to be approved by the school bond authority. That's why those leases for the apartments, we were involved because our involvement was as a member of the school bond authority. And so that's really not approving the lease, it's more approving the financial component of the lease. And I don't know if all of you are aware, but the school bond authority is made up of the commissioner of F&A, the 3 constitutional officers, the chancellor, and the president of UT. And so, and I guess the governor is probably, and it's chaired by the comptroller. So all those things have to, and actually we have a meeting tomorrow, but all those projects that are funded through school bond authority, leases, and it could be leases for equipment, leases for real property, all those have to be approved by the school bond authority. And so we have to evaluate even those on the looking at the debt component of that work.
Just out of curiosity, any reason the University of Tennessee should have 2 representatives on the school bond authority? Excuse me, my co-hound is opposing my question.
Who's the other one?
Are you asking about my dog barking? No. did you get Regent Gill's question there, Dick?
So Tennessee, UT only has the UT president. We have Chancellor Tidings is the chancellor that's on the school bond authority, and then president of UT system. So it's the TBR system and the UT system are the two of the members of the school bond authority.
Mark, did that satisfy your question?
I think your dog and my dog are wanting to converse. Yes, it did answer the question. It's not a sufficient answer for me. I don't understand why UT should be in that position, but that's okay. And I think I have an endorsement from your dog, Emily.
Exactly. Of course you do. Dick, anything else?
That's all I have for TSU. If nobody has any other questions.
Any other questions or comments, please? Well, they are fortunate to have the benefit of your years of experience at this. I know it's a lot, and TSU is pretty important to this community and beyond. So thank you for the time and effort you're putting into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Kim McCormick, I think you were up next with a couple of our team. Hard to believe, but it's already time to start talking legislative priorities for 2023.
I know, it surely is. Well, good morning, Chancellor Tidings, Vice Chair Reynolds, and members of the committee. Today, I will be reviewing the legislative priorities and the legislative requests that we as a team have created in draft form for you all. Pending the results of this committee's review, we will be finalizing both the priorities and the request for presentation to both the External Affairs Committee and, due to fiscal impact, the Finance Committee during the full board meeting in September. Hence, as we go along, that hopefully will explain why draft is stamped on each of these slides. So as you know, every year we assemble system-wide legislative priorities that are broad-based in nature. They are essentially 6 pillars of focus that drive the advocacy efforts of our External Affairs team before the General Assembly and in some cases the administration. And these priorities before you, very similar to those of last year, are based on input from campus representatives, presidents, system office staff, the chancellor, and other stakeholders. So rather than reading those to you, I will pause for just a moment for you to review. Again, they're very similar to last year. Okay. And now let's move on to the proposed legislative request. Again, from feedback that we've received from all the stakeholders, our TBR team has created a set of potential legislative requests that support our overarching legislative priorities from this committee's review, or for this committee's review, and committee permitting, I will introduce the request and then they will be expanded upon in more detail, including the fiscal impact that we discussed during the finance portion of this presentation, which is going to be led by Vice Chancellor Alicia Fox. So with that, our first request will be related to education and workforce alignment, and we would like to pursue legislation to provide funding for a pilot program that provides financial aid for short-term workforce training in high-demand areas. Again, we're going to talk about these in a bit. In the arena of enrollment and success challenges that our institutions have been facing, as we all know, we would propose legislation to provide a student support network, modernizing the learning experience, telling the Tennessee higher ed story, TCAT and community college dual enrollment expansion, and then making financial aid more efficient. And then finally, in the realm of campus safety and security, we would like to see the establishment of enhanced campus safety and security measures, including equipment upgrades and emergency communications. Vice Chair Reynolds and committee members, this concludes the summary portion of our presentation. Again, these are our collective thoughts, obviously in draft form. We will not be asking the board to vote upon the priorities, as we never do. We will simply be seeking affirmation that we are moving forward in the right direction that is at the will of the Chancellor in this body. And if there are no questions at this point, Vice Chair, I would like to ask that Executive Vice Chancellors Fox and Deaton join me to continue the presentation with more detail on each of these requests, including the financial estimates. So
Any
Dr. Fox?
Yeah, well, any questions or comments for Kim? And before we go to Alicia, Regent George was able to get on with us during the TSU update. And so my apologies. Regent George, welcome. And of course, we need to ask you those two important questions now that you're with us. Mariah?
Hi, Regent George. May you confirm that you can simultaneously hear and speak with others participating in the meeting? And also, are you alone in the room?
Yes, and yes.
Thank you, sir.
To both questions.
Yeah. Thank you and welcome. And Kim, you said we're going back to Dr. Fox now, correct?
That's correct. Everyone's
All right.
ready. Dr. Fox?
Thank you. So good morning again. So myself and Dr. McCormick and Dr. Deaton are going to just expand a little bit more on what Dr. McCormick just presented for the external affairs. So we are going to expand on the legislative priorities, give you a little bit more information and background on those, and then include the fiscal impact and some estimates on that. Again, this is all in draft form, as you will see on the slides that are presented in the following. Next slide, please. And again, this is from feedback that we received from all the stakeholders. Our TBR leadership team has created this potential list of requests for the committee's review. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. McCormick to talk about our first strategic initiative, education and workforce alignment.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fox. And when we talk about education and workforce alignment, we've thought about pursuing legislation that will provide the funding for a pilot program that provides the financial aid for short-term workforce training in high-demand areas, as I mentioned earlier. We're thinking through this, honestly, as a team. Last year, we had a Representative Sapicki carried a bill to provide this very thing for a very small pilot in the Columbia State program. It was lineman training, if I remember correctly, and it was around $1.5 million. So again, we're talking through this. Would love to have input on whether or not we try to go in that direction of a very small pilot again next year, or if we want to potentially expand this to ask for funding for other schools to be involved. So that is why when we talk about the fiscal impact, that's why the cost here is to be determined, because those decisions are still being made. Any questions on that one? Okay.
Good morning, Vice Chair Reynolds, Dr. Tidings, members of the board. I will pick up this one. The next budget request item that you're going to hear is really a package that we're trying to address the overall challenges that this board has heard about, both from COVID, of course, and the subsequent enrollment loss that we've had over the past couple of years, enrollment that's likely to have continued downward pressure once we see enrollments for this fall that you'll hear about at the full board meeting. But again, overall, trying to holistically address the challenges that have both festered for a while and have really come to light the last few years, and some new challenges as well. Many of the things you'll hear about here that's in this package obviously connect with other partners in our spaces, Achieves and THEC, that will require cooperation with. And some of these recommendations you will also see directly reflect other work that's going on throughout the state. And I'll reference specifically the General Assembly's Committee on the Education, Recovery, and Innovation work. They released their own study about ways that Tennessee can address both K-12 and higher ed challenges due to COVID. Some of these ideas will also reflect work that the Comptroller's Office has done, as well as TBR's own research and data analysis as well. But you're going to see two broad themes here. One is a category we're sort of loosely calling student recruitment and success investments. And then there's another element that'll end up with financial aid reforms. But the first package will have several parts. We can go to the next slide, please, Carol. So this first bucket has 4 parts, and I'll walk through them one by one. So first is our vision for what we're calling a student support network. And this is primarily centered around the idea that student mental health has become an acute challenge across higher ed. This is not unique to TBR at all, but has really come to the fore in the last few years. And Dr. Heidi Lemming and her team have done quite a bit of work in trying to understand that challenge, try to encourage campus investment where they can, bring on counselors and social service coordinators. But the reality is that we are probably understaffed in this area to a great degree. Across our community colleges, there are about 16 professional staff who are focused on mental health and counseling. By best estimates, based on best practices, that number should be 3 or 4 times that to serve a population of our size. And many of our TCATs just lack that personnel at all. So this first recommendation in this bucket would be to invest in a regional approach where colleges collectively have professionals in the mental health area that would serve a community college and proximate TCAT, sort of in a regional model. That's the pillar of that first recommendation. The second one is also a bit of a catch-all. It's going to bring together several observations and ideas that TBR has been thinking about for a few years, some of which this board will recognize, particularly in the first one, which is to invest more resources in a system-wide effort that we call the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning. Essentially, this is trying to reflect the vast needs that faculty have to help them innovate in the classroom. Part of this, you'll recall, when COVID hit, TBR, like everyone else, pretty instantly went to virtually all online courses. There was a thought that would recede back to normal, whatever normal is, after the pandemic. But as we've seen the last couple of years, we've sort of begun to settle into, I guess, a new normal, where we still have, in some cases, in some colleges, about half of courses are still taught online. And so faculty are still needing to try to find ways to better enhance that experience, to better serve students, to find creative ways to deliver the material in that online environment along with the in-person environment. So this first investment would be to bring resources to bear, centralized here at TBR, that allow us, the professional staff, to serve the vast needs across our 6,000 faculty across TBR. The second 2 pieces of the second bullet of this modernizing the learning experience are going to speak to 2 technological advances we hope to make, which, by the way, is a preview of coming attractions we're going to dig into deeply at the retreat, and thinking a lot about the way technology is changing the way that TBR thinks about recruitment and student success. But the first one would be to take to scale a customer relations manager, a CRM, which is a generic term that's been adopted broadly by higher ed, that essentially brings technology to bear to allow colleges to better communicate with their students. It allows, the software allows the coordination across the college of various functions, whether it's advising, financial aid, admissions. It allows the college to coordinate how they reach out to students, when they reach out, to whom they reach out, and allows them to much more efficiently communicate in both the recruitment process, throughout the student success and advising process, in ways that are really now the state of the art, really is the tip of the spear as far as colleges communicating with students. We have some efforts underway, pockets which are trying to adopt a CRM, this customer relations manager, but this recommendation would take that to scale and provide those resources for all 40 colleges to address the imperatives they have in the recruitment and success space. And then the final item for this success technology piece of the second bullet is another item you've heard Dr. Lemming speak about, a comprehensive learner record system. This is another tool that higher ed is beginning to adopt that's really trying to be a dynamic, real-time student portfolio, which allows a student and the employer to understand precisely what skills, what background, what experiences the student has had that prepare them for the company, the employer, and a job. In some ways, this is not quite, I would say, replacing the traditional transcript, but the idea of the transcript was to convey information about what the student has learned and what she is prepared to do. In many ways, that transcript with the list of courses and grades has become inadequate for that task. And so the comprehensive learner record, the CLR, tries to enhance the information that an employer can see about a student, what skills he or she's required, and why they're a fit for a job. It's much more portable, much more dynamic, much more real time, in ways that we think would both serve students and also help employers identify talent as they're trying to fill positions. As I'm halfway through, let me just pause to see if there are questions about either of these first two broad buckets and the specific items therein.
I have a question. This is Danny. And you may be handling this later, but under the modernizing the learning experience, will you be giving at the meeting more specific examples of what that means? I mean, I'm having a hard time getting my head around what that means, what you will be purchasing, or I don't understand the need. I'm just not sure exactly an example of that.
Regent Varlin, yes, they would specifically go to purchase the technologies to do the comprehensive learner record and the customer relations manager at scale for the 40 colleges. It would be specifically funding that software.
Okay. All right, thanks. And are you going to talk more in depth about some of this at the meeting? Some of these points?
Yeah, yes, definitely. We will go into much more depth about what these would do, how they would work, and the benefits we think that it would accrue to students, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Are there other questions on those first two ideas? The third one here is what we're in a draft form calling telling the higher education story. And if you begin to hear Matthew Gann singing hallelujahs in the background, you'll have to forgive him, because this would greatly enhance our ability to reach students and to tell our story and to serve our colleges, both with direct marketing dollars, and currently TCATs really don't have any of those resources, but also to have, again, system-wide staff who can help coordinate communications and outreach, graphic designers for all 40 colleges, allowing them to much better recruit and market and tell the story about higher ed, and particularly in this time period where students have begun to, in many ways, kind of rethink what that return on investment, that value proposition is. Being able to tell our story and make sure our name is out there for students would fill a gap that currently TBR has. And then the final piece is referencing back to something that Dr. Tidings mentioned earlier about just the tremendous expansion in the dual enrollment space that we've seen across our colleges. Many of our schools just simply don't have a person dedicated to establishing and maintaining dual enrollment relationships across the K-12 sector. This would basically allow each college to bring on a person who's thinking solely about that. Some of our colleges have more than double dual enrollment numbers just in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's still a huge priority of course, our K-12 partners to have those EPSO experiences. So this investment would help the colleges deal with the rapidly increasing scope of dual enrollment opportunities, both in the TCAT space and in the community college space.
Hey Russ,
yes, sir.
Miles Burdine here. That last bullet, that is a great idea, but I wanted to ask a question about the regionally based coordinating marketing and communication staff.
Yes.
There used to be someone up in this area that did that. Does that no longer exist?
Matthew, if you're on, are you able to address that? I'm not familiar with the specifics of the personnel structure. And if not, Richard, we can definitely get back with you on that. But
I think there was just one person that kind of took care of the TCATs and the community colleges up in this area.
yeah, and we still have, personnel here at TBR definitely assist them now, but it's a thin staff, and it's not enough to fulfill the needs that are out there.
Right.
I'll need to get back
I
with
like
you
that idea.
that specific question, though.
I think it's a great idea.
Russ, we do not have anyone dedicated in any regions right now.
Okay.
That may have been in the past, before 5, 6 years ago, but not now. We do not.
This is Matt. Yeah, this is Matthew. At one point, a few TCATs put together some budgets to hire a person, but that was short-lived.
Yeah.
So have we, as a follow-up to Miles's question, have we benchmarked ourselves with other systems to see what they spend in this marketing and communications front?
Matthew, do you have insight into that?
Yeah, a lot of that is anecdotal and asking people what they spend. I do know we've compared, there was a report out on what private sector, especially technical colleges, have spent during COVID. And we don't even get to the 0.5 to 1% of what the private for-profit colleges spent in this area. So we are definitely behind.
Hey, Russ,
Emily,
all this.
Go ahead. Where'd you
Go
go?
ahead. Yeah.
All of this sounds really good, and you may still have a little bit more in your presentation. I was wondering if we have considered allocating dollars to things like transportation or computers or, support for life skills or something that can get in the way from kids really making the transition from high school to community college. Have we thought about that type of budget?
We have, Regent Green. It's a good question. And I would say our colleges put a lot of emphasis on that now and make investments in that space. Of course, there's college access organizations throughout the state who also think in that space and partner with us. That is indeed something that I think is a collective challenge because of the decline, as you know, in the college going rate and students who are not making that transition in numbers that they were. That is something that colleges invest quite a bit in and have really ramped up their efforts, I think, in that recruitment space as they've thought about that strategic enrollment management function and how that is changing now that we're seeing such declines in that college going rate.
And Dr. Deaton, I'll piggyback on what you're saying and in response to that. Many of our colleges have funds that are set up specifically for those type of activities that come in through their foundations. That's not one that we have looked at for a legislative ask, but we tend to do that through other means. HER funds was also a great effort toward that. We were allowed to use our HER funds for those types of things. And with regard to the marketing and benchmarking with other states, it's a little hard for us to do that because we are unique in the way that we operate. And also, to Matthew and his team's credit, some of the things that they're trying to do are not traditional marketing. They are making outreach in areas that we've never really done before because we are in an environment that is so different from environments we've been in before. So things just look a little different. And I applaud Matthew and his team for thinking outside the box in ways that we're trying to reach students.
This is Danny. I may be going down a rabbit hole, so just stop me. But I can't really stop how things come down into my head. And when we're talking about all this on a higher level, and this may be more marketing, the choice to not go to college right now, how much do you think that is influenced by the wages that are being offered, in some of these jobs that don't require college? And how impactful would it be to go at that with more specific information to the students on how much money they can make above that, or can they? I don't know. The first question is really the question, and then how we go forward with that. Does anybody know that?
Dan, that's a great question, and one that we are asking ourselves. And, you know, right now, I'll be real honest with you, we don't have a good handle on why students aren't coming. We are working diligently to try and get some type of understanding of what's happening. It is multifaceted. You do have people that are taking jobs they might not have taken before because the outreach from the companies is so heavy. One of the things that we're doing with workforce development, with our economic development divisions, is that we've talked about trying to be more focused on the employers and working with them. You'll know that we already have some projects set up across the state where we work in tandem with employers, and the employer says, if you go back to school, we will increase your wages at this level. So we're trying to be much more intentional in that arena. We know that there are still people, for whatever reason, sitting in their parents' basement, not doing anything. They're not going to college. They're not getting jobs. They're not moving out of their parents' home. I mean, there is an entire group that we just can't seem to get our hands on. And so these are the questions that we're trying to answer. And again, Matthew is, again, very conscious and cognitive that the world shifted. And it's not, you know, 5 years ago, we put billboards up and we got a return on our investment. We know billboards aren't going to do it for us right now. That's not what's going to drive people into our colleges. And we've got to figure out a better formula. Dual enrollment is where we are picking up the biggest steam right now. As you heard Russ say, as you saw our numbers. So we know that the outreach that we're doing there is working. We're getting a really good return on investment for everything that we're doing in that arena. It is that group. And this has happened before. And several years ago, we used to call the 7-year black hole, where for 7 years right out of high school, people just sort of disappeared. If they didn't go right to college and they didn't go right to work, we just weren't real sure where they went. Well, we've got a much bigger black hole than we've ever had before. At 7-year mark, they tend to start figuring out, it's time. I've got to go do something. So we'll continue to look for ways to get those individuals enticed and coming back into school. It does work when an employer says, this is the amount of money you can make here, and I will give you an interview if you go there and get these skill sets. So that's
especially if you team it up with telling their parents, get your kid out of the basement.
Well, you laugh, but I swear we talked about doing an ad that says, is your internet slow because your child is still sitting in your basement? Would you like to get rid of it? We came up with a lot of fun ideas.
Are we too proud to do that?
Yeah, we are working on it. Again, the reason why we know we have got to put some money toward this, it's not a matter of right now we built it and they're going to come. They're not coming right now.
Yeah.
And Chancellor, to that point, so you've got sort of whatever this current black hole is. Then we're also facing the enrollment cliff, which of course was written about even in our audit. That's just a reality of declining high school populations. So I guess my question is, based on all of this good work that's ongoing, where do our Achieving the Dreams initiatives fit in with this? And have we looked through the ADT lens at these priorities and initiatives?
Well, ATD's mission is primarily to make sure that when you get students into your college, you get students out. That's about the retention. They work primarily with the retention factor. They look at it by segmenting those individuals into categories as to where are you losing the most students, what are you not getting in. And so a lot of the Achieving the Dream work is not about getting them in the door and to begin with, it's about keeping them in the door once you get them.
Okay.
So that work will continue because we're going to continue to keep retention as high as we possibly can. again, we are still doing a good job with that. We're not losing people more than we've ever lost people. We're just simply not getting people in the door. So we're still doing a good job with the retention rate, still making progress there, want to do even better. We just got to figure out where these people are. Where have they gone? And they didn't leave Tennessee because our population has not gone down.
Okay,
Chancellor, I'm sorry, Chancellor, is this, are we talking about both TCATs and community colleges, or, I mean, because we just, came out of a period where we had waiting lists for the TCATs, are we now having a deficit or having open positions that are unfilled in the TCATs, or is this primarily a community college? Where does analyze the problem a little bit?
Reggie, you're right. It's primarily community college. Our TCATs are not down. Some are up. Some are actually up in enrollment. We do see that we've got a little bit of shift in some of the programmatic areas at TCAT, but not a major problem, because most of the students, some of the areas that are low in enrollment, what we've been able to do is shift some people that thought they wanted to go into one program. We've been able to help them see value in some other programs. So we've been doing a little bit of shifting. Our wait list situation does look much better. We've worked diligently to reduce that with both the governor's money and with trying to make sure that the wait list is clean. And Dr. Deaton's going to go into that a lot more with you at the retreat about what we've been doing with our wait list numbers. But last year it was 11,300 on the wait list. We're right at 8,300 today. And if y'all remember, my goal is to always have a wait list. I don't want to never be without one, because that means there's always people trying to get in, and we always want people to be wanting to come to us. And I contend that maybe some universities, if they'd looked at a wait list opportunity, might not be in some of the situations that they're in right now with housing and other things. But that's another story.
I think dual enrollment is one of the keys, but I'll add to that, making sure the kids get paid as early as age 16.
Yeah.
That's key too.
Apprenticeship is really helping in that. That is,
yep.
We again are increasing what we're able to do with apprenticeships. And companies are just, again, everybody is in desperate need of employees. So companies are really willing to work with us right now.
Yeah. Even Eastman's doing it now.
Yeah. We've got a great program that's starting with them.
Yep.
So it's really good.
Well, Chancellor, I guess my thought is that this is a complicated area. I mean, since I've been sitting here, I've gotten one recommendation, and I've had multiples on the poor bargain of a 4-year degree now, and I'm sure that would reflect on 2-year degrees as well. And Mitch Daniels had a really interesting article on September 1st in the Wall Street Journal about what they've done at Purdue and the changes there. And there was a really interesting but somewhat disturbing report put out by the National Association of Scientists on the University of Tennessee, of all places. In colleges, I think right now, 4-year colleges are getting a second look and a more critical viewpoint than they once did. And I think that may have something to do with what we're talking about. The TCATs aren't getting that. But and I say that not as a definitive analysis, except that this is an area of unknown. And I would encourage us to thoroughly drill down here. I'd love for us to go into this at our retreat before taking any action on it, and then go slow. Let's try some more programs at a test level or whatnot. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
And Dr. Tidings, two just sort of foreshadowing. So 2 of these topics are sessions we will dig into deeply at the retreat. Both the one, Reggie, you raised about, broadly speaking, the alignment question between workforce and education, how that is changing, how we're trying to think about that anew, get ahead of it. And also, Regent Barlin, your question or your comments about marketing, and other sessions about the future of marketing and what the current environment requires us, how it requires us to think about marketing differently and outreach to students. And so these are two topics which fortuitously are on the retreat agenda that we'll see in a few months rather.
Thank you, and I didn't mean to hijack the conversation. Sorry.
Not a hijack at all.
No, I'm glad that y'all are asking the questions. These are the questions we're asking, so it's
exactly.
fun for us to talk about it with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And importantly, we know that Regent Gill is not dozing after all. He's right there, engaged.
That kudos to Russ for bringing up I'm sorry. Go ahead, Danny.
No, it was Chancellor. Finish your thought, Regent Gill, and then we'll go back to Chancellor.
I was just going to give kudos to Russ for being able to keep me awake.
Oh, that's good. And Chancellor, I think you were responding to Regent Gill.
I was just going to ask you to please share that article from Purdue with us, if you would.
Yeah, or Rick Locker can get it for us. I don't remember it in our clips, but if Rick's on and you could pull that up, that'd be great.
No, I don't think the Wall Street Journal makes our clips very often. So can I send it to one of you all and then it be distributed? That would be great.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
It might end up going to my cousins without realizing it, or some of my friends when I'm trying to send it more than 3 people.
No, we will definitely distribute. Thank you for sending it to, you can just send it to me. That'd be great.
Thanks.
Carol, if you could go to the next slide, we will discuss the last item. And the last item is that second broad bucket, which is, and this one's focused on financial aid. One of the shortcomings of the current financial aid system, this has been cited by various research, is that most of it's designed to address direct costs, tuition and fees. We think there's an opportunity here to address some of the very topics that we were just talking about just now, to help our Pell eligible students, our lowest income students in Promise and Reconnect, with assistance beyond direct tuition fees. To address books, supplies, non-mandatory fees, really any other direct costs that students are facing. This is a bit of a gap in current financial aid policy. And so the idea here would be to provide up to $250 per semester or $500 per year for those direct costs beyond tuition fees for any Pell eligible student within Promise and Reconnect. That estimate's about $10 million based on that broad math there, and we think would fill a gap that our students are facing now that those current programs are not able to cover. Those are the 2 broad buckets and those ideas. I can at this point pause again for questions and then turn it back to Vice Chancellor Fox. Alicia, I'll turn it back to you, I guess.
That's right.
Sorry, of course I had to wait until
my time was up before I asked a question. I just have a really quick question on that last item. The $250 per semester, what percent of the total cost of those items is that?
Yeah, and Reach Powers, it's a good question. This varies a lot. And so, and you've also got sort of a moving target because the average book and supply cost is kind of coming down because of the significant work that we're doing in what's called the OER space, the Open Education Resources space, the idea of low-cost free tuition. It's a bit hard to get a handle on, and there's a balance here we're trying to strike between something that we think is still affordable for the state, but that significantly does impact the average student costs. They vary so much by program. Some TCAP programs face some very high costs for supplies. Others who are in, say, a humanities course major may not have as many of those costs. So it kind of varies by student, by program, but we think that $250 per semester goes a long way to address some of those needs in an affordable way for the state.
So somewhere in the range of maybe half the cost or something like that? I know it varies, but I'm just generally trying to get an idea if it's a drop in the bucket or if it's meaningful, significant, and
based on based on the estimates that our colleges do for the cost of attendance figures, they estimate book costs to be about $1,200 per year, usually. Again, that varies widely. So if you think of that book cost about $1,200, this roughly gets at half of that. So it's not trying to do the whole thing, but trying to get at half of that. But again, that number is coming down over time as well. And again, that's just an average estimate by student. It's hard to get a precise number until you know what program they're in, but it's probably roughly half, I would say, is the progress this would make.
Okay, thank you. And I think you're trying to really balance what seems to be a reasonable amount that you could supplement as much as trying to meet their needs, right?
That's correct. Trying to have something that's realistic and that we think is attainable for the state. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's nothing else. Alicia, back to you, I guess.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Deaton. So our final initiative is our safety and security initiative. So in the realm of safety and security, we are proposing the establishment of an Emergency Communications Center for the newly formed TBR Police Department, as well as funding to continue the important work of increasing the safety and security at both the TCATs and the community colleges. You may recall that for 3 years, the community colleges did receive some funding for safety and security upgrades. That funding ended in 2021. So since that time, we reached out to the community colleges and TCATs to see where they were in that work as far as making the improvements that were needed in that first round of funding, and where they were still lacking as they felt in safety and security areas. In addition, the Department of Homeland Security did campus assessments to see where our campuses were at and provide some best practices and things that we could do to improve that. So based on the feedback that we received from the community colleges as far as where they are and what has been done, what they still need, we do think providing some additional funding for equipment and facilities upgrades at the community colleges and TCATs is still a need that is out there. So we are proposing that as well. As you will see, we've got a cost to be determined on this slide. It really is. We need to have some further conversations about, what are realistic estimates on these and where different schools are with their levels of security and what would need to be funded at that time. But some examples of the equipment upgrades that still need to happen. Several schools requested either new cameras as they didn't have any, or additional cameras or replacement of existing. Access control for exterior doors remains a top priority for many schools. Speaker systems as well as lighting upgrades to exterior areas were the top requests that we received from feedback from the campuses. And so those are the safety and security package that we're looking at putting together. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the equipment or the Emergency Communications Center.
Vice Chair Reynolds, I'd be remiss if I didn't say how important I thought this was based on what's happened in Memphis, as we mentioned earlier. I also read an article, I think there were some Vanderbilt students that had voiced their concerns in the Nashville area and just talked about how terrified they were on campuses. Obviously, this happened along the University of Memphis's main drag, if you will, with Eliza. And so just fully support this effort, especially today.
If I could add something to that as well, I 100% agree with you, Nisha. But I found the comment, whether it's true or not, doesn't really matter, but I found the comment so offensive when the police, or I don't know if it was Memphis police or if it was the university police, but were saying, oh, well, this doesn't happen very often. In terms of beefing up security and all that kind of stuff, it just has to happen one time for it to be, whether that's a true statement or not, that's great. But if it's now happened and it's put things in people's head, I think our responsibility is to hope it never happens, because we have such good, we have done our job in safety that it never happens, because one time is too many. I don't that was very offensive to me when whoever said that about Memphis, somebody, oh, good. Well, sorry it was her, that, unlucky day. I just don't ever say that. To me, that's just awful. Thanks.
Regent Marlin, there were several offensive things that have been said on this issue. I mean, there were people saying, she shouldn't have been running at 4:30 in the morning, or she should have been, there are things that we should be protecting people and making sure that it feels safe for folks to be there, not making disparaging statements like that. So, and I know that when it seems like so long ago that I was on a college campus and walking to classes, we could call a phone line at UT and there would be an escort that took you from place to place. And there are just lots of ways that I was made to feel safe when I was in school that I just don't know. And we've talked about the cultural differences with students who are maybe more protected because they're living at home with parents, and the independence of being on campus and having sort of a different experience of just adulthood is not there. So there are lots of reasons that I think the awareness level may be down or whatnot. And I just think whatever we can do to make sure our student population and anybody that's around the campus is safe is critical.
Yeah. Well, there's no question, all of y'all know that, when we have our students coming out of high school, their brains aren't developed. And so we can't expect them to be responsible in one area, like on a college campus, and we're like on another area, we're going, oh, well, their brains aren't developed. Well, which one is it? We have to protect our students and our faculty and anybody else that shows up on campus. That's all there is to it. I agree.
Dr. Fox, anything else on this after this good discussion?
Yep. Vice Chair Reynolds, this concludes the content portion, providing the fiscal impact related to what Executive Vice Chancellor McCormick presented in external affairs information.
Anything else from anyone else from these 2023 legislative priorities and the budget request? And we'll obviously have another look at this here, at least in the next couple of weeks. And these slides went from today's presentation, and I assume, Kim, in our books, so to speak, for the next meeting.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. So kind of in keeping with this theme, a topic we've heard about once before, the effort to reimagine the community college experience. Russ, why don't you give us just a brief reminder of this project, as then you also ease us into the RFP update.
Indeed, and yes, this is thematically related. It's a good segue. And as we go through this, much of what I'll describe, we discussed in our June encounter with the board, and you've seen some emails about it, but just to kind of refresh your memory about how this came about and what it's doing. And you can go ahead to the next slide, the first slide, please, Carol. This is, of course, an effort that stems from a concept paper. An effort that stems from a concept paper that tries to think about ways to dramatically increase the number of students who graduate from TBR, and then back to the alignment question we've been discussing, connecting them with livable wage, meaningful careers and jobs that are current with the economy. That concept paper, as y'all saw and as discussed in June, again, tries to directly look in the eye and be very honest about the need for that alignment and how that calculus is changing the last couple of years with COVID and with the economic dynamics that y'all discussed here this morning. That sort of changed the way we think about this. And it's also trying to be honest with the student access and success challenges that we have now. This board hears a lot about our graduation rates and access points and where we have challenges, where we've seen improvements, but this paper tried to be very honest about where those things are and how all this has altered the way that we think about these questions in a COVID-19 world. So that concept paper, and you can go to the next slide, Carol. That concept paper really tried to put 4 ideas on the table at the heart of sort of a reform agenda. And I'm going to kind of work in the middle and then come out. So the second bullet is really the essence of what we're trying to do in the concept paper. And I would say everything on this slide, all of these ideas are things that many other higher ed systems are doing. TBR has been trying. I mean, these are not new in the sense that no one's ever tried them before, but it is new in the way we've tried to package them and align the way the student encounters the college, hopefully in ways that, again, make dramatic improvements in our success rates. But the essence of the reimagining the community college experience concept is in that second bullet, which is that the first semester and the first year change for the student. And they encounter courses that comprise what is hopefully a workforce ready certificate that is itself embedded in their larger degree program that they're pursuing. So in other words, we're not asking students to suddenly encounter a fork in the road and make a choice about whether you go the transfer route or whether you go a workforce ready route. We're trying to embed the workforce ready experiences and credentials within any path that student chooses, transfer or not. That's the essence of the idea. And then around that, you see these other bullets. The first one here is before a student can make that choice, we've got to dramatically ramp up how we engage them in their pre-college career exploration. The advising at that early juncture has to be much more robust as we think about the choices that student will have to make. And then on the back end, once they hopefully have something of value that first semester, that first year, rethinking how those credentials articulate into not only their eventual degree pathways, but also into the second semester and third semester courses where they will now encounter the general education courses, hopefully in a recontextualized way, such where it more connects with their program of study. Again, all of these ideas are designed to dramatically change the trajectory for many of our students. That concept paper is, again, very honest about where we have gaps that we need to address right now. So as the board engaged that, and we can go to the next slide, Carol, as we thought through how to effectuate this, as the board knows, we did issue an internal RFP to all 13 community colleges in late July. We asked the colleges to alert us if they were going to choose to engage this and to submit a proposal. 12 of the 13 community colleges did that. Columbia State was the one that chose not to submit a letter of intent. Those proposals to us are due actually on Monday. So we're anxiously awaiting the ideas the colleges have that would give life to those concepts you just saw in the previous slide and would think about how they would shape their students' experience in a unique way for their campus that, again, fits with the concept in the paper. Once we have a sense of which colleges are ready, what their needs are, we'll take those recommendations, of course, to Dr. Tidings, who will then hopefully announce the next steps and the winners of that at the board meeting here in a few weeks at Pellissippi. That then kicks off a year of really intensive planning and preparation that TBR will engage in with those colleges so that they are hopefully ready by this time next fall, by next academic year, August of 2023, to implement some of these ideas at scale with students they've identified and to test this out to see if it works. Which will then track for 2 full years after that to collect data in real time and report back, of course, to the board quite often about how things are going and what we're seeing from our colleges. So again, the key thing, though, is that here at Pellissippi, we will hopefully be announcing and giving you a sense of what the colleges have proposed and which projects we think are ready to go forward and receive the funding. Next slide, please, Carol. I think that's the last slide I have on this. Yeah, that was the last one. So I'll pause for questions about this. Again, much of this has been in the emails we've been sending you. We've got the concept paper out on the website now for anyone to consume, and we are anxiously awaiting colleges and to submit their ideas here in another few days.
Questions, comments for Russ? Oh,
yeah,
there's Mark Gill, and then I think Chancellor was going to add on. Okay.
Yeah. Kudos for your all's work on this. I'm really impressed and very hopeful about it.
And Regent Gill, I was just going to say, I hope this is where your head was going when you were asking your questions earlier. These are the questions we've been asking. What we're giving must be relevant, must be useful, and time to degree has got to be considered. Those are all things that have got to bring value to what we're doing with our students. And this is the work that the team has been guiding over the last 10 months for sure.
Will you guys have plenty of time between September 12 and a grant announcement on September 23 to run this evaluation, Russ? That's not much time. I know you can do it.
Right. It will be tight, no doubt. And we were trying to maximize the time the colleges had to develop their ideas and prepare, and also being cognizant of the fact that we're asking to do this during the start of the semester when they have some other things going on. But one of the things we did try to do was we tried to very much focus the questions we were asking for each college. There are 7 questions, each of which we've asked for a word limit. And so the material that we'll need to consume and evaluate will not be voluminous. It'll hopefully be very targeted, very specific, and I think will hopefully allow us to get a recommendation to the chancellor by that date. Yes.
Anything else, you guys, for Russ on this?
Hey, Russ, how many colleges will be awarded the grant out of those that apply?
We've yet to put a number on it. We're going to wait and see both the scope and quality and intent of the proposals. My own thinking is we want definitely more than a couple, but probably, I don't know if we have the fiscal capacity for all 12. So it kind of depends upon what we see, Region Green. And that's one of the judgments we'll need to make about just based on the quality of what we see and whether it adheres to the concept and whether we have the fiscal capacity to do so. But it's an open-ended question right now.
Okay. Will we have a chance to kind of hear from a couple of those folks when we get together in October?
We hope so. Yeah, we hope that the announcement is giving you a sense of what they're going to do, at least at some high level. And if you would like to hear from those presidents, I think we can definitely arrange that, Dr. Tidings, if you'd like.
Yeah. And again, please remember, this did not go to the colleges cold on September the 12th. Remember that we're having weekly phone calls with our presidents. So we have been socializing this information with them for months. They've been thinking about their projects. We intentionally didn't put parameters on the number that we would select and the dollar value that each college would receive, because we want to use common sense when we do the evaluation and not have artificial barriers that we had to work within. We didn't want to say everybody's going to get 200,000 because we wanted to be intentional with what came in. And once we read them, then we'll make decisions based on where we think the biggest gains can be made with the dollars that we have to invest.
Anybody else?
This is Ramona.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Ramona.
Dr. Deaton knows this because I've been emailing with him on this before, and faculty do have some concerns about the embedded certificates. I think there is a fear that in the long run, this will pull students away from degree programs. But I think one thing that you could focus on in this is the first bullet point that was in the previous slide, the idea of career exploration. And I just bit my tongue as I was saying that. But I think that is an important part that may be lacking in a lot of ways, because our students coming out of high school, they don't know what a career is, what goes into actually earning what you have to have for that career. And I mean, looking at this as somebody that's almost 50 years old, I knew what my parents did, and I knew what a doctor was because I went to the doctor, and I knew what a police officer was. But look at the careers that are out there. I think that this is something on that end that is a very good idea, because if we get our students knowing what is needed as they start the path, maybe we won't lose them along the way. Maybe they won't deviate from the path and kind of hit those off ramps.
No, that's great insight. And when you have that conversation with your colleagues, Regent Shelton, is there a greater understanding or agreement with this conceptually, at least?
I don't know about that. I do think that
Okay.
the fear that this is going to pull people away from degree programs is maybe something that needs more discussion at the faculty level. I think that, you know, just more talk about it, I think would help people understand that that's not the end game with this.
That's right.
Thank you. That's why we have faculty regents. So we appreciate the input. And Russ, I think you were about to say something. I apologize if I interrupted.
No, not at all. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Regent Shelton. She has posed some great questions to us, has been a conduit as she has gathered faculty questions about it. She's been a great guide in this as we've gone through it. And I do want to acknowledge, I mean, she's right. This has gotten the attention of faculty within certain disciplines who are unsure what this portends for the future. I mean, again, our hope is that, you know, more of our students are being retained and succeeding so that they can go into those degree pathways. Again, that the idea is that these certificates are embedded in that journey. So hopefully long term, it's a win-win in both situations. But I did want to just acknowledge Regent Shelton and the work she's done and the guidance she's provided us. It's been very helpful in this process.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening.
Oh, anybody else?
I had just one comment. I loved what she said, specifically about the people not knowing or being exposed to things outside of what their parents have done. I mean, I can say that was completely the case with me. My last job, I finally found what I was supposed to have been doing the whole time. And it is really hard. You don't know what you don't know, but in addition to what the pre-college career exploration is, it's just even explaining in those terms how limited this young person, particularly, or even not a young person, how limited they may have been in their exploration. In other words, not to feel bad that you don't know what you want to do. You've only been exposed to a teeny little piece of this pie. And I think that that's good advice in terms of keeping our own folks from being afraid of that. But honestly, if we would do that, if more colleges, universities would do that, we would save people a lot of time and money. You know, it's you want people to like their jobs and be happy, but we just really only see a small part within our own families. And gosh knows, just even, especially like when you say to people, you know, I sit at meetings at the National Lab all the time, and it's just the known thing that, you know, we're training people in college for jobs that don't exist. And that doesn't really, people don't understand exactly what you mean by that unless you are in a space that you see that happening. Oh my gosh, this wasn't, you know, composites, all these things that have happened in the last however many, 10, 15 years. So having the opportunity to explain that and explore that in an exciting way that you get those teachers understanding, we're hoping to help them make the most important decision besides the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with in their life. And I like those comments. I think they're important. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Russ, with that good discussion, you are up again next, I believe, as we go back to the topic of the Jackson State and Dyersburg State service areas.
Yes. So following up from the previous board meeting discussion, as this board requested, wanted to revisit this topic and particularly give some time for the discussions that Drs. Cook and Pimentel would have with their constituents to play out and get some feedback. And so what we want to do today is to very briefly revisit again what the background and the request is to adjust these service areas for these two colleges, but then quickly getting to Dr. Cook and Dr. Pimentel, who will again remind the board which counties are proposed to shift, and in particular, what has happened in the interim since we last met with the conversations they've had with their constituents. But as background, on the first slide, recall that our 13 community colleges have defined spheres of responsibility where we split up our 95 counties into those 13 service areas that is established by this body. There are not legislative mandates on this. This is a policy decision the board makes. And going back about a year, both the leadership at Dyersburg and Jackson expressed interest in adjusting these service areas to better reflect the changing dynamics, demographic shifts, et cetera. Those extensive conversations led us to that initial discussion at the June board meeting where we proposed those shifts that you'll see here in the next slide. So at this point, as we go to the next slide, let me pause and I will ask Drs. Cook and Pimentel to both review, and these next two slides are just going to remind the board which counties we're talking about. But then if they can both speak to the reflections they have, the conversations they have had about how this has transpired with their constituencies over the last few months since we last met. So Drs. Cook and Pimentel, at this point, I will turn it to you for these next few slides.
Thank you, Dr. Deaton, and good morning, everyone. The four areas that we are talking about are Crockett, Henry, Hayward, and Weakley counties. Those are the four that that currently Jackson State has, and those would be turned over to Dyersburg. And Gibson County which is currently split between us both, Jackson State will pick up that county and be responsible for the entire county at this point. We held meetings earlier this year, sent emails, letters, spoke to a variety of people, and I'm sure Scott can talk about this as well. We received, at least I have received, no real feedback other than the Henry County Mayor said that he was very much for it, and that was really the extent of the conversation. You know, one of the efforts here, I think, is that as a system, we're trying to serve our students in the best possible way, and I think this makes sense because, you know, Jackson State has 14 counties. That's quite a large service area, and Dyersburg does not. And so, especially in those counties that are close to them, it makes sense, I think, that they take over those because they can better service the students in those areas. But as of today, I've not received any negative feedback at all.
I'll echo what Dr. Pimentel has shared. The feedback I've received has been wholly positive. When we talked with our state legislators, I only received one question. It was about whether we would be adding a program that Jackson State currently has, and I assured the senator that we were not going to add a program to Jackson State's disadvantage. Dr. Pimentel and I both see this as an opportunity to better serve West Tennessee in tandem. We're going to work very closely together to make sure that we meet the existing needs of West Tennessee, but also to help meet the needs of Blue Oval City. So as far as I'm concerned, I see this as a win for Dyersburg State, for Jackson State, for TBR, and for West Tennessee. I would be happy to answer any questions if I could, but the reception has been very positive in our area with our local and state representatives, our foundation, our alumni, and our employees.
Any questions from the regents? And this will be an action item on our September 23rd agenda.
That's correct.
Oh, Rush, you have one more slide. You want to wrap this up?
Yes, ma'am. Well, and just like the original proposal, if this were to be enacted, it would go into effect next year. So there's a time to transition. Both colleges and both presidents have thought a lot about the potential impacts to Blue Oval City. We don't think there are any negative impacts at all there, nor to students who mostly won't see this disruption. But again, I want to applaud Dr. Cook and Dr. Pimentel for having all those conversations and really jointly approaching that challenge. What can be a delicate task to switch service areas was handled with aplomb. And so I appreciate both of them, the way they handled it.
No, agree. Thanks for hearing the regents' feedback and taking this and going back out in the field, if you will. And to your point, Russ, the fact that our two presidents have presented such a united front on this, I think has made a big difference. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Well, hearing none, Chancellor, speaking of the September board meeting, do you want to go over this draft with us and point out any highlights? And while you're
yes.
at it, offer any closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Each of you should have received a copy of the draft of the September meeting in your packets. And do we have any questions or concerns about those materials that were in there? You will vote on the 2023 meeting dates at the September board meeting. Those are also included in your packet. And Mariah will continue to keep you updated on details of the 22nd and 23rd board meeting with the release of the materials and a schedule of events for your review closer to the date of the meeting. We are so looking forward to being at Pellissippi in person all together. I think they've got a fantastic agenda planned for us. We are going to go to the Blount County campus for dinner, prepared by their new culinary program there. If you've not had a chance to see that campus, it is absolutely spectacular. So looking forward to our trip there. Are there any questions about September's meeting? All right. Well, if not, again, we are looking forward to that meeting. I do want to just take a moment and thank this board. Again, today is just one example of the thoughtfulness that each of you bring to these meetings when you come. You are always well prepared, read, and listen intently to what we bring to you to talk about, and that is appreciated more than I could ever say. You give us such good guidance, and we move together as a system. We walk together in this journey, and it is truly appreciated. So thanks to each and every one of you.
Those are kind words, and we're all fortunate to work with this group of really caring, incredible people, aren't we, Chancellor? So, and thanks to you and your team, you deliver the same back to us. So thank you. Well, folks, with that, it is 10:18. We can move immediately into audit. But on behalf of Theo the dog, I would like to suggest that we leave this Teams up, but that we take a quick break. I don't want to lose our audit committee members rather in particular. But let's give ourselves these 11 minutes and be back on Teams at 10:30. Is there a general consensus for that? Got a couple of thumbs up there. Thank you. All right. Take 10. We'll see you very shortly.
and the live stream as well.
Very good, thank you. Let me, as I call this meeting to order, and right before I ask Mariah to call the roll, I just want to say I'm serving as interim committee chair today with Joey Hatch's departure. And while we are awaiting the potential of other appointments, and since, again, we're in a truncated period of time, just thought I would do this today until we know more. And then obviously we'll be making some committee assignments and some changes along the way, as we typically do in September of every year. So this is an unusual circumstance, and I appreciate your understanding and your patience. So with that, let's call the meeting of the Audit Committee to order, and I will ask Secretary Perry once again to call the roll and ask the two questions.
In accordance with TCA 844-108C3, there are two questions that need to be answered by regents for the record. First, can the regent simultaneously hear and speak with others participating in the meeting? And second, is the regent alone in the room? If the answer to both questions is yes, the regent can simply answer yes to both questions. Anyone who is not alone should identify any other people present in the room with the regent. When I call your name, please answer these two questions. I will start with our audit committee members, and then we'll double check to confirm any other regents who have decided to remain on the line. Regent Apple.
Here and yes to both questions.
Regent Verdine.
Here and yes to both questions.
Regent Green.
Here and yes to both questions.
Vice Chair Reynolds.
Here and yes to both.
Thank you. We do have a quorum for our committee. I'll now check to confirm other regents who may have remained on the line or decided to join. Governor Lee. Regent George.
Yes to both questions.
Regent Gill. And I understand he is not going to be joining with us. Commissioner Hatcher. Regent House. Regent Lee.
Yes to both questions.
Regent Long. Regent Powers.
Here and yes to both.
Commissioner Schwinn. Regent Shelton.
Here and yes to both.
Regent Varlin. Regent Wong. And Regent White. All right, thank you, Vice Chair Reynolds. We are good to go.
Thank you very much. Once again, we are meeting electronically as the most economically efficient way to accomplish a timely review by the Audit Committee today. Since this is, of course, a non-controversial and routine item, I would propose once again that we adopt the necessity to meet electronically by unanimous consent. As always, if there is any objection, please feel free to do so, and we will have a roll call vote. But if I hear no objection, we will assume the necessity to meet electronically is adopted by unanimous consent. Thank you. Hearing no objections, then we will call on our distinguished auditor, Mike Batson, to begin his report, all of which we have hopefully had the time to review in advance. Mike, let's go to informational reporting, and I'll just let you continue to lead us through those 4 items, please, sir.
Great. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Audit Committee members and other regents that are attending, and welcome to Regent Lee for your first Audit Committee meeting, and also any campus auditors and other staff that are present. First, on informational reporting, a little bit different item today, the U.S. Department of Defense compliance surveys. There are several of those in your materials. I don't believe that's something that we have presented before, and it came up a few months ago that we had several colleges that had received those compliance surveys. Each year, Department of Defense performs compliance surveys. It's really a self-study for approximately 250 institutions across the country, with which Department of Defense has a memorandum of understanding for tuition assistance programs for active military personnel. Um, the colleges, they receive a questionnaire and then they submit the information back to the Department of Defense, who then issues a report. There are a number of findings that you will see. None of those really are control or risk type findings. Nothing really significant there. But again, we don't want to have any findings. We want to make sure we're in compliance. In a lot of cases, I think the colleges were in compliance. It's just when they submitted the information back to the Department of Defense, it may not have been exactly what they were looking for. For example, we had a couple of colleges that had recommendations related to accreditation. And what it looks like happened is the college sent a link to the accreditation SACS website, but not an actual picture of their accreditation approval. And so therefore there's recommendations there, but just an example of some of the findings or recommendations were no evidence that the college ensures that they are not providing a commission or bonus or other incentives for enrolling students. No documentation that the institution asked active military personnel to contact their education services officer prior to enrollment. I mentioned the accreditation issue, but several things like that that are relatively easy fixes by your appropriate personnel, sending them directions, giving them a policy or procedure on how to handle those tuition assistance students. For those 6 colleges, we took that information and Jackie in our office put together some guidance for all the colleges, TCATs and community colleges, for sort of lessons learned in these reviews, so that going forward, the colleges can make sure that if they have the information there, they are providing exactly what the Department of Defense is looking for, and also that they can make sure that they're in compliance with the rules of the Memorandum of Understanding. And I think that's going to be very helpful. We got some very positive feedback from some of the colleges for that information. But again, it's sort of a guide in when you receive this survey, here's some things you need to look for to make sure that you're in compliance. And I think that's going to be a very positive thing that we can provide for the colleges going forward. If there are any questions on those Department of Defense compliance surveys, I'll be glad to answer those. And please stop me at any time if you have any questions at all.
And that goes obviously for both audit committee members and any other regents who may have questions.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
State audit reports, no state audit reports issued this time for any of our colleges. The current TBR state audit is ongoing. It's in the wrap-up stages now, but so that is it there. There are several external reviews and internal audit reports in the materials. Again, be glad to answer any questions on those. Not going to cover any of those specifically unless somebody would like to ask questions on those. We'll move on to the findings and recommendation logs. And to kind of fall back on our previous meeting, we have changed quite a bit in how we track the recommendations, and I'll get to that in a minute. But one thing I want to emphasize is, when we talk about recommendations being resolved, what we're really talking about is the auditor has made a recommendation, whether it's us, state audit, or whoever, but management comes up with a plan to address that recommendation. And so what we're really looking for is, did management do what they agreed to do at the beginning? We use the term recommendation, but it's really, what did management say they're going to do to alleviate this issue? And it's really up to the president and the management of the college to address those issues and to get those things resolved. But you'll see in your materials, we have made quite a bit of progress in the last few months, probably more than we have before, except for maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and getting some of the older ones processed and completed. What we did based on our previous meeting and suggestions from the audit committee and the chancellor, We have gone to a monthly sort of, I'll say, follow-up where we ask the campus auditors for any recommendations to go past their due date. And the due date is something, again, that management has come up with. It's not what the auditors give them. But any that go past their due date, that the auditor begin a monthly follow-up for those and checking with management to say, where are we on this? And we recognize that there are going to be factors that can push things back, but we want to make sure that we're still focused on those corrective action plans, and that if there are any stumbling blocks there, that we're aware of that, and we know we can push a date back or something like that. So we're doing monthly reports on those. You'll see in the recommendation logs that we have added comments there so that the auditor can put in what management has said, sort of the status of where they're at if it is not cleared. We also added a column for the appropriate vice chancellor at TBR. And I have started giving the vice chancellors the recommendation logs. I'm going to be getting them that later this week, again, for this past month, so that they're aware of what the recommendations are in their area. And as we get stale recommendations, I'll be informing the vice chancellor about those in their area. Depending on how that goes and how progress is being made at the campus, we may take other steps. If we see that we're not getting appropriate movement in a certain area for some of the older ones, then I'll have conversations with the auditor to see, are there any extenuating circumstances, what's going on there. If we're not comfortable that we're where we need to be, then I'll have a conversation with the president and find out what's going on there. Hopefully we get movement there. If not, then we may ask the vice chancellor to get involved and try to help move those things forward. So far, we've only had to ask the vice chancellor formally in one case to get involved. And I think we're making good progress there. Dr. Puryear has helped some with Motlow and a couple of their recommendations. We've had meetings scheduled with Dr. Torrance, and I think we're going to get good movement there. So fortunately, we've only had to do that one time, and I think we're going to see positive results from that. But overall, for this new process and the new way that we're doing it, it's created some more work from the auditors, and I appreciate greatly the efforts they've made. But as we get some of the stale ones moved off, that level of effort, I think, will go back down and once we clear some of these things away. But as you can see in the materials, there has been great progress there in getting both old ones and more recent recommendations cleared. There are some that are still older, I think, for the other colleges. And just to be clear, I've had conversations with those auditors and other staff related to that, and we think we're in a good place. It's just there have been, say, supply chain issues or turnover, things like that that are sort of out of the campus's control in some extent, but we think they're making a good faith effort on some of those that are older now, and I think we'll be having those cleared pretty soon also. That's sort of my update on our new process and how that's working. And again, I think it's good. It's good to keep the vice chancellors informed, and it's good for us to have those more interactive conversations with the campus on the older recommendations. But I'll be glad to answer any questions about that process or any recommendations that you may have concerns about.
Anything for Mike? It's important to keep upgrading this process, and I know we're all grateful for the changes you continue to make and the responsiveness from the campuses. I understand Regent Varlin has rejoined. So Mariah, while folks think of any potential questions, do you want to ask Regent Varlin the two questions?
Yes, ma'am. Regent Varlin, can you confirm if you can simultaneously hear and speak with others participating in the meeting? And also, are you alone in the room?
I finally can. Thank you. And yes, I'm alone.
Thank you.
Anything for Mike? If not, we'll continue to move on.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. In your materials, there are the other internal audit reports and other reviews. I don't have any of those to pull out and address specifically unless any of the regents have questions about any of those or follow up on those. Next, system-wide internal audit updates, just a couple of items here. First, Suzanne Walker, who has been the Director of Internal Audit at Pellissippi, has retired effective at the end of August. We certainly want to thank Suzanne for her work. She has been with the system, I believe, for around 30 years, plus a few years with the Comptroller's Office prior to that. And we are certainly going to miss her. She's been a great resource and a great body of knowledge for us. We wish Suzanne well going forward in her retirement, and we'll continue to stay in touch with her. We did a send-off for her at our July meeting, so we're glad we had the opportunity to see her before her retirement. But we want to recognize her and appreciate that and her efforts. In that vein, President Wise, I think, has planned to recommend an interim replacement for Suzanne for the Chancellor's approval, and that will be for a period he and I had discussed for 1 year to 18 months, and I think that's a good way to fill that position currently so that we don't really miss a beat there, and we can discuss that further later on. But I think President Wise has a good plan there in place. Next is internal audit trainings. We're required by our standards to maintain training 40 hours a year, and we try to provide that to our auditors across the system in-house as much as we can. We had a July training in conjunction with our regular meeting that provided 4 hours of training. We had Daniel Porter, who is retired from the Comptroller's Office Investigations Unit, came and spoke about interviewing, and it's always good to have a refresher there. I don't know, most of you probably not seen Daniel present, but he's an excellent presenter, and it's always good to have him and see him. So that was very helpful. And then I'm sure most of you remember Blaine Clements, who's now at Austin P. He also did a presentation for us on departmental audits and some changes he's made at Austin P. And I think that's going to help us. Very good information for us going forward. So we're grateful to Blaine for coming back and touching base with us again and doing some training there. And as most of you know, we do a fall retreat every year for our auditors. We've done that probably for, I guess, the last 6 years or so in conjunction with University of Tennessee Audit Office. We had agreed this past year to make that an every other year joint effort so that each of our systems can kind of do our own thing for a year and focus on ourselves. We've got that coming up in October for the TBR office. However, we have made that open to both anybody at UT as well as other universities who want to attend. We will charge them a fee, but we have opened that up, and we've gotten a good response there. I think we've got somebody from Vanderbilt coming, of course, Austin P, and some of the other universities in the area. So we'll have participation there. It's always good to have some time with the university auditors and kind of exchange ideas and connect and see where we are in certain areas. So we're glad that we've got Vanderbilt coming as well as some other universities to that training in October. And then we will hopefully next year go back and do a joint effort with University of Tennessee system next year. That concludes the system-wide internal audit updates, unless there are any questions on those trainings. Next, a short one, University Comptroller's audits. There was just one this time around, Tennessee Tech University, and they had no findings in their report. So congratulations to them on a clean audit. And just a reminder, Dick Tracy spoke a little bit about this earlier, but we still do have the fiduciary role with the universities in terms of bond finance, and so that's why we present their audit reports during our sessions. They are in your materials.
Thank you, Mike. That concludes our informational reporting, which doesn't require any action on the part of the committee, but the consent agenda will require a roll call vote. It's 2 items. We can take them together. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. First is a review of our fiscal year 2023 upcoming audit plans in your materials on page 73. Again, be glad to take any questions there. We have that broken out by the type of audit as well as the functional area. You'll see that in your charts. Just a couple of items of note. We try to emphasize risk-based audits, and those are audits that the campus auditor and campus management have decided are important in addressing their risk, and we try to have a good percentage of those, and a good percentage usually is probably 30 to 40%, somewhere in there. We also will have required audits, and we distinguish those in audit planning and for our quality assurance purposes. But for our required audits, we try to make those risk-based, and where we see areas of concern that we want to make sure we're in compliance in certain things, or that we need to have looked at. Examples of required audits, as you know, statute requires that we audit at least 30% of our presidents each year, so that's included in required audits. Those are going on right now as we speak. This year for required audits, we have asked that the auditors audit HERF funds and the presentation and accounting for those. Again, we call that a required audit, but we think that is really risk-based and is a good audit for us to get completed in terms of making sure that we're in compliance with all the various requirements of HERF funding that we received. And so we think that's a good, although we call it required, it is risk-based. And we will also be auditing some part of the Complete College Tennessee Act this year. We will formulate that more later in the year, but we have sent out the audit program for the HERF audit, and those will be coming later in the year to you. In terms of the areas that we look at, financial management, institutional support are usually the more higher volume areas in terms of audits. We have increased information technology space, especially having Dawn on board now, has really helped there. So that information is in your materials in terms of what we are looking at for the current audit plan. And I do want to back up on required audits and risk-based audits. We look at sort of special requests by the presidents and follow-ups, those type things. I really kind of consider those quasi-risk-based, because that's usually something either that we have addressed as a risk or that the president or senior staff has decided that's an area that we need to look at. So I sort of ball those in with risk-based audits in looking at those percentages. If there are any questions on the upcoming audit plans, be glad to answer those. Okay, hearing none, I'll move ahead. Review of internal audit charters. We are required to present the charters to you when we have the new ones. For Northeast State, Dr. McCord has signed their internal audit charter, or I don't know that he signed it yet, but the interim president has signed, so that one is in your materials. We will be getting one from Dr. McCord shortly. And then at Cleveland State, Dr. Stone has signed the internal audit charter there, and so those are in your materials. And that is just really a formality. No changes to the charters, it's just we have the new president sign them.
Any questions for Mike? And again, these are rather 2 consent agenda items, but if there's, as always, if there's a need for further discussion or consideration, of course, any member of the committee could ask that an item be pulled. But if not, No, thank you. If not, since this does require a roll call vote, we will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Regent Apple. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Regent Burdine. Any further discussion? If not, Mariah, would you please call the roll?
Regent Apple.
Aye.
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Green.
Aye.
Chair Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Mike, we are back to you for another informational item.
This is the status report for our audit plans for the past fiscal year. Again, I touched on this a little bit. The majority of them are in institutional support and financial management areas. Again, probably third is information technology, which is good that we're getting a deeper look there than we have in the past few years, as that really is our high risk area that touches on everything. So again, it's good that we're getting a higher percentage there. Required audits this past time were also a higher percentage. That includes the president's expense audits. The Veterans Affairs reviews that we did this past time, we presented those at the last meeting. There are a few of those reports in your materials this time. Again, we try to get 30 to 40% in risk-based. We're a little bit below that this time, but I think that the required audits that we had were really risk-based in terms of the VA and of course President's expense. So that I'm more comfortable with those percentages when we look at it from that standpoint. Their investigations, again, we did a good job, I think, of completing our investigations. We had 8 that started the year. We opened 10 and we are back down to 5 now as we close the year. So making good efforts there, and Jennifer and the internal auditors are really doing a good job getting those open and closed as they come in. But I'm happy to answer any questions on our plan versus actual audits this past time.
Mike, I do have one quick question, and it's on the slide that's in front of us, the plan versus actual audit hours. There might have been a staff change there that I just don't remember, but we're below 50% at Columbia State on the planned hours completed or achieved.
Right. That is, Erica's had a lot of work that she's done there that not necessarily related to audits, but other consulting areas that have come up, and she has shifted some things around. Have been looking at that. I'm comfortable with the changes that she has made there. So there are various reasons those percentages will drop, but she has, shifted some hours to other matters outside of specific audits, I think is the best way to put it. But that will kind of open and close. But
thank you. Anybody else? So our final item today for the public portion of this meeting is our annual review of the Audit Committee Charter, and this also will require a vote by the committee.
On the slides are highlights. Again, we're required by statute to follow the Institute of Internal Auditors international standards for internal auditing, and we are also required to report on those each year to the Audit Committee. I'm required to certify my independence each year, and I do an independence statement for that. But we like to kind of hit some highlights here in terms of the charter, and we'll get into the standards a little more later. In your materials is a chart that we've had for quite a while that I think does a good job of summarizing the responsibilities of the Audit Committee and things that are outlined in the charter. Again, provide oversight and accountability on all aspects within TBR. including any external audits, especially with the comptroller's office. But as you know, we try to provide any federal audits, compliance reviews, any other state agencies to you. The charter also gives us authority to audit or investigate any matter that comes under the Regent's purview. As we just talked about, approving the annual internal audit plan, results of our audits, we're required to present those to you, and those are spelled out in the charter. The management of our office in terms of budget, we report on that annually to you. Budget, salaries, changes in staffing, again, requires your review and approval. And we want to, again, as members come on and off, we will provide this information, but we like to do it annually so that we know it has been presented, and it, sort of a refresher here. Again, that chart, I think, is on page 129, on 135 of your materials, really outlines this very well. And the charter is in the materials also.
Any questions for Mike on this? Oh, you want to go over standards as well before we vote? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The standards, again, as I mentioned, we're required to follow the IIA standards and to present certain information to you. The standards, they're quite extensive, but I will kind of cover the highlights that I think we need to cover with you for informational purposes. But there are different types of standards. First are attribute standards, which includes requirements for the charter, purpose, authority, and responsibility of internal audit, which is included in our charter. We try to wrap as much from the standards as we can in that charter. To our mission for internal audit at TBR, our mission statement is to enhance and protect the value of the TBR system and its institutions by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight to management and the board. And we try to make sure that we focus on that with everything we do, and that is conveyed to you. The standards, of course, require that we have organizational independence, which is facilitated through this body, through the audit committee. I report to the audit committee, administratively to Dr. Fox for budget, and also to the chancellor. It also requires individual objectivity for us, that we have no impairments, that we act in an unbiased manner. It requires due professional care, which means that we act with the care and skill of a reasonably prudent, competent auditor. It also requires a quality assurance and improvement program, including external review. And we had talked about that earlier this year. We will have our external review again. That 5 years is up. Many of you remember the previous one we had, which went very well. But we will be having that in 2023. And we also are continually looking at our operations. We're working on our internal reviews. We did one back in last summer, a year ago, and we're refreshing that as we speak. So we try to keep that to make sure we're on top of things, on top of the standards, and that we're operating as we should. The standards also have performance standards, which are basically how we manage internal audit and how we do our work from day to day. It includes planning, communication to the audit committee of our resources, our requirements, what we see is risk, what we see as our audit plan, and what we need, and as well as to get your thoughts on that, as well as senior management, chancellor, vice chancellors. We try to stay in touch and contacting communication with them constantly to find out what do we need, what does the board need, and what does the system office need from us. So we try to be very open with that. Policies, we have our internal audit policies, which you've seen in the past. It requires coordination for audits, internal and external, and that we address risk, governance, we consider all those matters, and when we do our audit plan, what do we see as a risk for the system or for the individual colleges, and is government addressing risk and addressing strategic planning issues. And so we try to keep all those in focus as we go forward. The standards also require that we communicate results, give you reports, findings, and that we also communicate concerns outside of reports, with any risks or other areas of management governance that we see. And as you know, we have had those conversations in the past, but again, we want to make sure that you understand that we are addressing those issues through these standards. So I've kind of quickly covered the highlights of the standards are summarized in your materials. It goes on for several pages. So we want to make sure you had more of the detail there in the materials. But I wanted to touch on those that I thought were important for you to hear right now. The standards, I think, on page 136 of the materials, but feel free, and not just for this meeting, as you go through any of the stuff, if you have a question later on, always, you know where to find me, and I'm happy to answer anything that comes up that you have. But again, just wanted to touch on the highlights for the standards. If there are any questions there, be glad to ask before the vote. I mean, to answer those before the vote, sorry.
Anything for Mike? If not, we need a motion to approve the recommendation of no changes for this annual review of our audit committee charter.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I did not mention, I should have, that we review the charter throughout the year. And as we have recommendations for changes, we will make those to you. We have no recommendations for changes from our office.
Thank you. So a motion to thank you, Yolanda, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Any discussion? Once again, Mariah, would you call the roll, please?
Regent Apple.
Aye.
Regent Verdine.
Aye.
Regent Green.
Aye.
Chair Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Mike, thank you and your team and all the auditors at the campus level. We know this is a great deal of work and we are very grateful. Does anyone have any further comments for Mike? If not, let's keep moving along. This does conclude our public session. So we will adjourn the public session. Everyone should have the information. Assuming there are no objections, we will conclude the audit committee today and move into the non-public session. Thank you all.
Thank you.